So hello you wonderful citizen of the internet, and welcome to a video about gothy topics that are blowing up on TikTok and causing quite a lot of interesting debate. I've seen some really good takes, and I've seen some just like astounding depressing idiocy, which I hate the fact that it's coming from within my own scene, and therefore I really wanted to chuck my 2 cents into the arena, despite the fact that I got back from Resistance yesterday. Resistance Festival, still got my wristband on, and I haven't really slept, and I'm quite discombobulated, and this might be gibberish. But the two issues really in question are the issues of glued on piercings, and like, does this make you a poser? Is this a fake thing to do? Is this like not the done thing in the goth scene? And then there's also the issue of clean goth, which seems to be a makeup style. You know, there was the clean girl aesthetic, and now people are kind of taking it into goth and calling clean goth a thing, and people's heads are exploding. So we'll start with the glued-on piercings, I guess, and we'll get into the really ragey stuff later. The glued-on piercings, there is a individual, I am afraid I completely forgot to check their pronouns, but there is a femme-presenting individual on TikTok who has like heavy facial piercings around their lips. And I don't know how long they had rocked these piercings before they told someone, or like maybe someone told on them or something, I don't know, but before it became known that these piercings were all glued on, and it seemed that they faced a really big amount of backlash for this. And the best comment I saw was someone saying, if a large part of being in the goth and the punk scenes is about like subversion and about breaking the rules, this person is young, they're like 16 years old or something, and their parents won't let them get piercings yet, but they have found a way to break the rules and to look how they want and to present how they want. And that's pretty fucking punk. And I thought that was a brilliant comeback. I thought that like, in a nutshell, that's really it. For myself, I have got 22 piercings, real ones, of which I think 18 or 19 are surviving, because I did lose my beloved tongue venoms and one nipple piercing and my labret piercing, which I still have a scar from, and has also, I don't know if I've shown you this and I can't zoom in, but can you see how eroded my gum is right at the front there? Like, my gum line is here, and then on this one tooth it's like here. And every 3 months I have to go to the dentist, and I have to have them scrape around like an area of my tooth that should be well under gum, and it isn't. And there's times that you can, it's literally like a raw nerve almost that they're scraping away at, all from having a labret piercing when I think I got it done when I was 16. I took the best care of it I possibly could. Like, I had a rounded back, I had a soft back on it, and it still eroded the F out of my gum. It's honestly amazing that I still have that tooth at this point. So I think if your parents are telling you you can't get piercings, and you've got strict parents, they really won't let you get piercings, that's one thing. But I don't think you should even need that as like an excuse to stick on your piercings instead. Like, I think it is wholly fine and justified to say, I want to see what my face looks like with piercings. I'm still experimenting. I mean, fuck, we have temporary tattoos. Why not have temporary piercings? Why not work out how these things look on you and feel on you before you actually go for them? Because particularly facial piercings, if you do get one and you find out, actually, this looks like a spot on me, like this just looks like a weird zit, or this just doesn't go with the placement of my face, like with my labret, like, I know I've had people say, oh, I really liked your labret. Like, to my mind, it never suited me because it was a symmetrical piercing, and I've got a very unsymmetrical face. So this pair of lip rings is a clip-on. This is what I would quite like to get done, really. I would quite like to have like off to the side lip rings, maybe 1, maybe 2. But after the whole labret gum fuckery thing. I don't think I will ever get another oral piercing. I didn't like kissing people when I had my librettin because I could feel it knocking on my teeth. So it was like a relationship ruiner of a piercing, and no one seems to talk about this with like mouth piercings. That it really changes the way kissing feels, and it doesn't usually improve it. Like for tongues, sure, for tongues that's like a whole different thing. That tongues, oral sex, all of that. There's some benefits, but kissing with like piercings around your lips, you're having metal smashed into your teeth by the other person, and if they've got metal on their mouth too, it's just a whole load of metal smashing together. Yeah, like if you really want like a heavily pierced like oral area, I think testing that out with like glued on piercings to start with is a really, really wise idea. As for people asking like what glue are you using? Eyelash glue. So I since we were talking about glued on piercings anyway, I thought I would glue a few on. Obviously, the argument that is thrown at people that glue on or clip on their piercings, it tends to kind of originate from Goth's kind of punk / post-punk roots, that it's just not very punk. It's a little bit fake to glue things on, if you've like permanently altered your body in some kind of way, particularly like the more hardcore you've gone, like if you've got facial piercings, if you've got facial tattoos, if you've got anything that's basically like a job stopper, body mod, like it's seen as really committing yourself to the scene. Like you're committed to the alternative lifestyle because you've done this thing to yourself, and like now no mainstream person's ever going to like accept you again. Does no one see the problem with this when you're talking about someone who is in their teens to early 20s, someone whose brain is not fully developed yet, and you're saying, yes, go and make a decision whereby the mainstream world will never accept you again? You don't even know if you're going to grow up to be mainstream, because I know it's like a bit of a verboten subject, but people do grow out of goth. They do grow out of punk. People change in ways that you cannot possibly imagine. You will change in ways that you cannot possibly imagine. And it's just not clever to make these decisions when you are so flipping young. So, do these things, but do them temporarily, glue them on, use your temporary tattoos, doodle on your face. You can create incredibly alternative looks without necessarily doing anything permanent to yourself. In fact, the human we were talking about at the beginning, who has the face full of glued on piercings, I actually really love a lot of the piercings they've managed to do because they're not real piercings. So they've been able to like just be very creative with it, like outside the bounds of like, okay, but this has to work as a piercing that's not going to grow out. Like, they've done some really cool stuff with it. And I guess I can understand there is a bit of a line between like what I've got on my face here, where you've just like accessorized your makeup with like a couple of little things. Compared to literally like being someone who looks like you are heavily into body mods, and it looks like you've really, really, really like gone through some shit to create your look, and then it turns out that it's all just glue. Like, I guess I can see why that perturbs people a bit more, because at that point it's not really a goth scene issue anymore. It's more a body mod scene issue. It's more like, okay, one of us, not one of us. I can see why people who are like heavily modded themselves would find it kind of odd, but I think the same things stand. I think so. The person is very young. Let them be young. Let them play. Let them be experimental. Maybe they will join your scene when they're older and become heavily into body mods. Maybe they will grow out of it and they will grow up with no scars, because the amount of glued on piercings they have, if they were to take all of those out, it probably would look like bad acne scarring, like all the pitting, all the holes and all the pitting around everywhere. Like they would probably have to have like procedures to remove some of the scars. Like, you know, they're young. I think it's a sensible thing to do. And as for myself, I have never really felt any shame in gluing or clipping on piercings. Like, I just think it's fun. I just think, you know, sometimes you're doing your makeup and you just feel like that would look so cool if I just had a piercing kind of over here, and you just want it for like one makeup style, and glue on those piercings if it makes you happy. Why not? So moving on to the clean goth aesthetic. As I say, this started with the clean girl aesthetic taking over on TikTok, and then someone's decided this should be a goth thing. We should have clean goth as an aesthetic, and I did see someone just losing their shit over this. Honestly, like I probably would have agreed with them like 15 years ago, because that was exactly me losing my shit. Like I saw this in my Facebook memories some years back, maybe 10, 15 years. And I was losing my shit on Facebook about pastel goth, because pastel goth was like a new thing then that I'd only just heard of, and I was looking it up and I was like, you can't have this, you know, goth is about dressing in black, goth styles are black and you're trying to make them pastel. What the fuck is this? This is like, you know, this is nonsense. This is the opposite of goth, and you're throwing it together, and why are we so determined to make everything goth, you know? And roll on like 15 years, pastel goth is a fully accepted part of the subculture now. It's like a fully accepted look. And I quite like it. You know, I own some pastel goth things. I mean, I say I quite like it. I have a vision in my mind of what pastel goth could be. Long, flowing, gorgeous Victorian garments, but done in like a splatter of gorgeous tie-dyes in pastels, or like you've got pastels just like running down it. So you've got these gorgeous colors all put together, like the Easter bunny got shot, you know, and it's beautiful. And maybe it's got like some black piping just to kind of like bring a bit of black into there and just give it some shape. And I think that would be gorgeous, like black with pastel, and it's all very flowing and Victorian. But, you know, anyway, like I'm no longer losing my shit about it. And because of this, whenever I see these new things, and you know, I had another shit fit when Health Goth came along, largely because of the Adidas. This is how it was in the 90s. You came to associate Adidas as like the, you know, the fucking cover picture monolith of bullies towards goths. And then roll on all these years, Health Goth springs up, and suddenly I'm seeing Adidas becoming goth. Like, you know, it's I don't know how to state this without it being vastly hyperbolic, but you know, it was like seeing some kind of like fascist symbolism being made into goth. It was the symbol of all of my schoolyard oppressors, and now goths were wearing it, and it blew my fucking mind. But again, Health Goth, well, to be fair, Health Goth has kind of faded off the map, hasn't it? Like it kind of exists, but you don't really see people making like Health Goth outfits anymore. We seem to have accepted the fact that we can exercise and be goth without having to make it like a thing. So that's kind of faded a little bit into obscurity, I feel like, but it's still like a recognized thing. You say Health Goth, people know what you mean. So really at this point, I've stopped losing my shit about people creating these new styles of goth. Like, it's really not worth it. It's not worth losing your shit about, because either in 10 years' time, it will have become a fundamental part of the goth scene, like pastel goth, like new goth, like, I mean, people have like a million words for like goths wearing white, be that like white goth, angel goth, ghost goth. But yeah, all these things come along, and they either become like a pivotal part of the scene, and you look back on this memory of yourself like losing your shit about it, and you just think, oh, that was so silly. You can't fight the tide, you know. Or as with Health Goth, it's a little blip, and it basically fades away into obscurity, and it's like it's not really worth getting your knickers in a twist about it. However, both of these arguments, the glued on piercings and the clean goth stuff, it did all devolve into these people who I can only assume are really quite young, who were basically saying that if you're into an alternative subculture, you should, you should eat, drink, and shit and fart alternativeness. Basically, like it should ooze into every bit of your life, because goth comes from post-punk, which comes from punk. It has punk roots. Therefore, you should be all about sticking it to the man in every single way that you possibly can. You should dress subversive, and you should be subversive, and you should do all of these things. And what bugs me about this is that, yes, goth came from post-punk, which came from punk, but that was around about half a century ago that it came from that. A lot of development has taken place. I mean, you listen to goth music now, and it has very little in common, sound-wise, a lot of it, with how it sounded at the beginning. You look at what goth people wear these days, it looks very different to how people looked in the beginning, apart from anyone who's deliberately seeking a old-fashioned look. And even they are going for a very stereotypical, like, one note of the whole symphony of original goth has been taken, and we have decided this is what trad goth is, when it was far more diverse in reality. So it's changed, like all of it has changed. It has changed and developed, because of course it has. Everything changes and develops over the course of half a century. But goth is not punk. Like they're two different, they are two different scenes. Growing up, like, I loved the music of both genres, like still do, but there was a reason that I chose goth more so than choosing punk. Because they are different scenes. Like, you cannot just apply wholesale punk ethos to goth, because it doesn't work. They are different scenes, they have different energies, they have different vibes, they have different participants, they have different lyrics. Like, it's very rare to find a ragingly political goth song. Like, there are some out there, but it's not the way it is with punk, where it's like basically that's going to be the main content of your lyrics. Equally, punk, you don't get many punk songs that that are about I don't know, sort of romance with vampires and things like this. They're different, they're completely different genres. And that means their participants' behaviour is going to be different. And specifically when it comes to the clean goth thing, people were kind of bitching about this, because it's like, oh, but you're buying all these beauty brands, and you're like, you're buying into capitalism and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, yeah, punk is a very anti-capitalist scene. Punk is far more hardcore on the DIY or die front than goth is. If you went to a punk gig and someone found out that you were wearing like £500 boots, they'd throw you out. They'd probably beat you up. I don't know, but it wouldn't be taken well. Whereas, like, goth brands, we know, goth brands, literally, there is something for every budget. There is no ceiling when it comes to kind of gothy brands. People are like, there's always been more of a split. Like, what I would perceive as the split between punk and goth when I was like a teenager, deciding like which one of these scenes do I really want to learn about and kind of throw myself into. And the main thing for me about goth over punk was just that it was more introspective. It was more literary, and I don't want to say intelligent, because there's a lot of incredibly intelligent punk bands. There's a lot of fiercely intelligent punks ranting about politics and all of these things. There's like a huge amount of glitteringly, fiercely intelligent punk stuff out there. But the culture of punk is so much more extroverted and hanging out on the streets and just being drunk with your friends and kind of laughing at dumb stuff, and like, that wasn't really for me. I liked the more kind of deep connecting, deep conversations, deep thinking, introverted nature that I found more so in goth people. The other thing about goth is kind of the elephant in the room. that it's a very middle class subculture. Like, obviously there are goths of like all social standings, but goth is definitely much more of a middle class subculture than punk is. Like, you know, if you're middle class and you're on the punk scene, like you've got to expect like quite a lot of ribbing about that. I think. Whereas like on the goth scene, it's you're not going to get piss taked for that in most places, because that is most people's backgrounds. Certainly around here it is most people's backgrounds, which means obviously that as people grow up, punk and goth, they do go in very different directions. And when it comes to like capitalism, is the point I'm making here. When it comes to capitalism, it's not, I mean, no one likes capitalism particularly, but like goths, we do quite like shopping for shiny shit, let's be real. Yeah, you know, whereas punks are more likely to be like, oh, I found this in a bin, found this in a thrift store, turned it into something beautiful. As I say, that the amount of goth brands out there now that cater to every possible thing you could desire. Like, yes, that there is still the kind of post-punk death rock look that is out there, that is still very much DIY or die and still very close to its punk roots. But you can't discount the, you know, the romantic goths and the Victorian goths and all the ones who like the, you know, the flowy, drapey, elegant, expensive stuff. So yeah, like trying to generalize goth as like, oh, you have to be about sticking it to the man, you can't spend more than however much money on all this shit, or you're selling out and you're not being a proper goth. It's like, punk, you're talking about punk there. You are talking about punk. Cannot apply punk ethos to goth, and you cannot apply goth ethos to punk. Is the final kind of ranty pants I would have about all of this. And yes, glued-on piercings. You know, if I was like a heavily pierced person and I really felt like, oh, I found someone who's like me, and then they're like, oh no, I just glue them all on. Yeah, I can see them being bothered. I can see them kind of being bothered, but as I say, considering the person's age, I think if you're picking an argument with a teenager and you're like a grown-ass adult, and you're picking an argument with a teenager about their aesthetic and the fact that they want to be more alternative than their parents are letting them, and if you're hating on that, I think you've got a fucking pickled walnut for a soul, you know. Let them grow up, let them explore, let them decide what they want to do in the long run. And apparently some people have also been getting bugged because they feel like this person is like copying, or other people who glue on piercings, they're copying their layout of piercings. And I don't know how I feel about that, really. Other than the fact it seems a bit silly, because, you know, piercing layouts, like a lot of people do have very similar piercing layouts. You don't see many people who have a genuinely like completely unique layout of piercings, and if they do, usually there's tattoos or scarification thrown in there too, just to really, and they've got something that really flows with their face, their body, their looks, like in a very individual way. And yeah, if you're like using makeup and doodahs to like completely copy that, and it's not just like a one-off look, it's not just a one-off tribute look, it's like literally, I wear this all the time, like, yeah, that would bother me, if someone was literally imitating it. But honestly, I'd much rather be bothered by someone copying something that was dear to me with glue that's like not permanent, and they're just copying it, and they'll probably grow out of this like stalking you phase, they'll probably grow out of it in like a month or two, and they'll go on to stalking someone else, and then they'll be doing their piercing layout, and it's not permanent, it's just glue. So even that is like, don't, it's not that deep, basically. But anyway, tell me your thoughts. Has any other TikTok goth or any other goth drama been blowing up while I've been away at Resistance? If you have opinions on these doodahs, feel free to give them below, even if you vehemently disagree with me. Tell me things. Anyway, I'm shutting up and going away. This was incoherent and long. Okay, I've run out. Peace.